Hey, how's it going? Bill Lethman here for Money Evolution. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the number one factor that you need to know and you need to understand if you're planning for retirement. And what is that factor? That factor is cash flow. And this is something that I talked about pretty extensively in a recent video that I did. That was called Retirement Planning in Your 50s. I'm in my 50s, you might be in your 50s, or you might be already in retirement or maybe just before retirement. But in that video that I recorded here recently about retirement planning in your 50s, I talked about cash flow and the variability of cash flows in those years leading up to retirement. What do those cash flows look like in early retirement? Maybe you don't have Social Security or your pension kicked in yet. Maybe you've got some higher medical expenses because you're on the exchanges instead of on Medicare. And then what does that look like for your cash flow once income stabilizes? And this is what I say is the most important factor to understand as you go into retirement, because there's a multitude of things that are happening here. Number one, if you're still working, what does your cash flow look like leading up into those years? What does your portfolio assets look like as you continue to save money and put money into 401k plans or IRA accounts and the buildup of those assets between now and retirement? But also in those years leading up to retirement, if you've got kids at home or you're still paying off a mortgage, you may still have some relatively high expenses, and that's something that you need to understand as well. Maybe some of those expenses start to drop off a little bit. Maybe your cash flow improves. That maybe gives you an opportunity to save more money for retirement if you're still maybe a little bit behind or you want to push for that earlier retirement. And then in early retirement, what do the cash flow gaps look like there? Likely to be much bigger. And then what does it look like at what we refer to as your full retirement age? That's the age that Social Security refers to as the age where you can get unreduced Social Security benefits. Maybe your pension's kicked in by then and your expenses have normalized. So when we do retirement planning, often we look at it in three phases. What does it look like while you're working? What does it look like in the early part of retirement? And then once those expenses stabilize. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to walk through some of those key things that you need to be thinking about to really map out your cash flow, whether you're doing it on a legal pad with a calculator or you've developed a spreadsheet. I've seen some really good spreadsheets that clients have done over the years. But what we're going to do is we're going to hop into our financial planning software that we use, and we're going to show you what it looks like in what we do with our Money Evolution plan, which is our high-end one-on-one financial planning program, or what you may be looking at if you're still a little ways away from retirement is something we call the Retirement Time Machine. It's a little bit more, we combine a DIY experience, but we really do a lot for you in that DIY, but you're going to get access to the same software we do in the high-end financial planning here. And real quick, while this is loading up here on the screen, if you're interested in learning more about what we do at Money Evolution, the Retirement Time Machine, or that Money Evolution plan, you can head over to moneyevolution.com. There's a lot of information over there. We've also built out a financial resource hub, education hub, I think is what we call it. And there's got all kinds of different articles, and the videos and things like that that we do are all there, organized by topic and subject. So head over to moneyevolution.com. We'll put some links in the description below. So here we have a hypothetical client here. It's a case study, Steve and Sandy Bishop. Maybe I've done this in other videos that you've seen here, but what I want to do here in this is give you a little bit of an idea of what it looks like as we start to map out the cash flow. Now, Steve and Sandy, they may be similar to your situation. Maybe they are younger, maybe they're a little bit older, but Steve's 53, Sandy's 52. They both want to retire at 63, so this is going to be an early retirement for them. They've got a couple of kids, James and Sarah, 17 and 14 years old. There's going to be some college expenses that we're going to showcase in here and how that maps into the cash flow. And they have about $2 million, a little bit over $2 million of investable assets. Again, the numbers really don't matter too much. Your numbers may be higher, they may be lower. Really doesn't make any difference for this. It's really just to get an idea in a sense of some of the things that go into this sort of planning. Now, ideally, if you're doing this kind of cash flow planning, there's a number of different things that you want to include. Of course, you want to figure out what are all of those different variable expenses, and maybe you've got a mortgage that's paid off in 3 years, you've got kids starting college in 2 years or 5 years, you have a car that's being paid off, or maybe you're doing a big anniversary trip and there's a big budget for that, or a wedding for one of your kids, for example, whatever that is, you've got all of these different expenses. So the first part of any financial plan is we want to have a way to map that out. And we can see up here visually at the top, we have a couple of graphs that, again, may be similar to your situation, and quite honestly, they're similar to most of our client situations, where if we look at the graph on the left, that's just showing the relationship of money coming in versus money going out. And while Steve and Sandy are still working, that green line is higher than the red line with the expenses going out. And it hopefully should be. If it's not, then either there's been a mistake with how you've inputted the numbers, maybe you've overestimated some of your expenses, or maybe you are truly running into a cash flow deficit and there's money that's being sucked out of your savings account, or money is getting built up on a credit card, or whatever that may be. But hopefully your green line is higher than your red line. And then we see something that we see on probably 95% or more of the financial plans that we do, and that's that for a few years in early retirement, you may see the expenses higher than the money coming in, and that's what we see here for Steve and Sandy. And then eventually, because of the way the plan treats things like required minimum distributions, eventually that green line goes higher and the cash flow becomes positive again. I'll show you a little bit more detail of what that means. There's still money coming out of the investment accounts, but it's in the form of an RMD, so it shows up on the positive side of the cash flow report. Then we can see probably what is, for all of our clients, whether you have $1 million, $500,000, or you have $10 or $15 million, the most important chart in the entire financial plan that we do is this one right here. And it just shows what the assets are doing over time. If the assets were running out, we would see a whole bunch of white space over here. We'd see these blue bars, which represent the total amount of your portfolio. Yes, we'd see that go to zero. But what we see, and we can see those three phases that I mentioned at the beginning of the video pretty clearly here. We see for a period of time a run-up of assets while they're still working. They're still saving money in the 401ks and their investment accounts. And then we see a period of time where the assets are leveled off, and that's because they have those bigger cash flow gaps. Their Social Security hasn't kicked in, their pension hasn't kicked in yet. And then once that pension and Social Security kicks in, those assets start to go up again. So the factors that are in this, and the factors that you would want to include if you were doing this on a spreadsheet, for example, you would want to try to include as much of it as you can. Of course, the money coming in, the money going out, a clear map of that year by year would be one. You'd also want to factor in things like inflation. That's something that, especially over 20 or 30 years or 40-year retirement, that could be a big deal, even at 3% inflation. What that means is that you could expect your expenses to double about once every 20 years. So if you're 50, you've got 40 years just to get to age 90, so you could see the cost of living basically double twice. So if it takes you $120,000 to live right now today, it could be $240,000, it could be almost $500,000 by the time you're at the end of your lifetime there. And so that's something very important to keep in mind. So inflation, the variable expenses, taxes would be a big one. And this is something that even in some of the best spreadsheets that I've seen clients do, it's very hard to get this right because there's different ways that different types of income is taxed. Social Security is taxed only up to 85% of your Social Security benefit. If you've got dividends or long-term capital gains, that's taxed at a preference rate. You've got a standard deduction in there. The tax tables themselves are going to be indexed to inflation, for example. And it's also a progressive tax system, which means that even if you're in, let's say, the 24% tax bracket, that doesn't mean that you're paying 24% on all of your income. It's only on that amount that's exceeding that previous tax bracket. So your effective tax rate may only be 19% or 20%, even if you're in a 24% marginal tax bracket. So software like this, like what we use here, is something that's going to be able to get a much more accurate depiction of what those taxes are going to look like. If you were doing something on a spreadsheet, you might just put in that 24% tax as an expense, even though it's going to be less. I would rather overestimate the expense than underestimate the expense. There's also going to be some rates of return in here too. You want to be pretty conservative with those rates of return, but you want to use something for some potential growth of the portfolio. We use for most of our plans a rate of 5.09%. That's just one of our defaults, and it keeps it a little bit more on the conservative side there. But keep in mind, even if you're averaging 5% or even if you're averaging 8%, there's going to be years that are up 20%, sometimes even more in some cases, but there's going to be years that are going to be negative as well, and you have to expect that there's going to be some negative returns. There's ways to deal with that. We'll talk about that in some other videos where we talk about retirement withdrawal strategies. Social Security is going to be a factor in here, and that's something that the software is going to be able to calculate that as well. That's going to be indexed with inflation with the assumptions in the plan, but it also has the ability to change that Social Security benefit. So if you know what your full retirement age amount is, but you want to take it earlier or you want to delay it later, that's going to, this plan software is really going to be able to calculate that for us. A couple other things that the software does, just a little bit on top of everything else. It has the ability to link accounts to the software so that if you have a 401k and maybe your spouse has a 401k, you've got some IRA accounts, maybe some old rollover accounts, you've got a brokerage, even money at the bank, wherever that money is, as long as you have an online access to those accounts, if you want, you have the ability, you don't have to, but you have the ability to link those accounts to the software so that every day it brings in the balances and positions into the software. So it gives you a really nice kind of moving target there that basically brings those balances in so you can see what's happening really on a daily basis there. So very good there. It's a very secure system. eMoney is the software program we use. It's actually owned by Fidelity, but it's encrypted and secure at the highest levels like all the other banking things. So those two charts are going to be basically the kind of high level picture of it. But what I want to do here is just spend a couple of minutes and show you the level of detail and how this can really, I think, provide some clarity and give you confidence that your plan is considering all of the different factors and everything in there. So we have basically down here a year by year running tally of everything that's happening in the plan. We've got the year, both of the ages for Steve and Sandy. And then the way this is laid out, everything from the center line to the left is all money coming into the plan. And then everything to the right is going to be outflows. And then at the far two columns on the right, we have our net cash flow, which is, if it's in black, that means that's excess money coming into the plan, so additional savings that you could do. Or and then the last one, or if it's in red, it's actually a subtraction from the portfolio. So those are your gaps when you start creating your retirement income plan. You're going to know how much money you may need to take out of the portfolio in those years. And then the portfolio assets is going to be a running tally. And it's going to be basically money coming in minus money going out, including those taxes, savings, and excess cash flow are all going to be factored into that, plus the growth of the portfolio in that far right column there, so you can see what's happening over time. But we can start to dive into these columns a little bit and say, for example, income flows. Steve and Sandy are both still working, but we can click in that column and then we can get a better idea of what that cash flow looks like. So Sandy's a couple years younger. We said they're both going to retire at age 63. Some people do it that way. Some people say, no, we both want to retire at the same time, which would mean Sandy retires maybe at 60 instead of 63 because of the 2-year age difference there. And we also said, though, that Steve was going to get a little part-time job, whatever. We got clients that work at a little local golf course or a shop, or they do a little bit of consulting. And you'd be surprised at how much that a little bit of extra income can do, especially if you're a little bit off track with some of your retirement, to get that extra income coming in, take pressure off of the portfolio. But in this case, I don't think Steve has to work. He just wanted to. We put it in there just to illustrate that it can happen that way. And then we have a pension for Steve. Pensions can be all different rules and requirements for that. We said here that Steve was going to get that pension at 65. Sometimes that's the common age to get the pension. Sometimes you can get a pension as early as 57 or 58 or 55 in some cases. A lot of city or government workers sometimes can get a pension early. Sometimes it's at a reduced rate, so those are things you'd want to factor in there. And then we have the Social Security benefits for both of them in here as well. And that is going to start on their age at their full retirement age. Again, you can play around with that and try it early, try it later, see what might work out a little bit better. It's not always the case that full retirement age is the best option. Sometimes it makes sense to take it early. Sometimes it makes sense to take it later, but it's really dependent on the cash flow situation, not anything else. Okay, so going back all the way to our cash flow report, we have a couple of other things going on here. We have planned distributions. That's primarily going to be the required minimum distribution. So that's something, if you've been thinking about that, you've got a lot of money that's in those traditional retirement accounts and you're worried about what that looks like at age 73 or 75, depending on what year your RMDs start. The RMDs might be pushing you up into a higher tax bracket, but that's at least giving you an idea of what those RMDs could look like there. And then we have some other inflows in here as well. And Steve and Sandy, just to illustrate it, we put in a rental property. So they have a small rental that's giving them $13,000 a year. And that rent hopefully is going to be indexed with inflation. So we show that going up over time to give you an idea on that. And then where I think a lot of financial plans may lack a little bit of specificity, I guess, good pronunciation of that word there, but where a lot of plans may lack that specifics, this is going to get into a lot of detail here. So when we look at expenses, there's a number of different things that go into this. One of those is going to be their core living expenses, and that's usually the way we put it in there is referred to as expenses that you're going to just have for the rest of your lifetime. So it's going to be things that you need pretty much on a monthly basis, your groceries, your entertainment, personal care, travel could be part of that, auto expenses might be a part of that living expense, all those different expenses that you're going to have every single year. Something like a mortgage payment, we can put that in there with the specifics of that mortgage and the interest rate, what you're making in payments. If maybe if you're making extra payments, you could add that in there as well. And then it's going to show when that mortgage is being paid off. So Steve and Sandy, they have about 4 years and a little bit into the next year left on their mortgage, so we can see that coming out as an expense, but then their cash flow should improve a little bit once that mortgage is paid off. Real estate expenses, we tend to leave that in a different column. That way, if we ever do like a buy-sell, you get rid of one house and buy another house if you're downsizing, then all of the expenses kind of go with that transaction. So it makes it very easy for us to do something like that. I'm going to downsize my house at retirement, for example, or I'm going to move to a different state. For the Money Evolution plans, we can even showcase like, okay, I'm in Michigan right now, but in retirement, I'm going to be in Florida, and show that tax difference of being in a state we charge 4.25% in the state of Michigan, or Michigan charges 4.25% for taxes, but Florida has a zero tax, so we can reflect that in the software here. And then here's where I think it gets really interesting is when we start to map out the other expenses, and we can be as specific as we want here. I've seen clients have twice as many columns as what we show here. But we have things like an anniversary trip. They're going to take an anniversary trip in 2033. We put that in there. We have some family health insurance right now. They still have kids that are still going to be on their medical program. They're still both working. So we have their health insurance as it is today. And then as they go into retirement, we have some pre-Medicare expenses. It's going to begin at the year that they retire, and then it's going to go over to Medicare once they turn age 65. And we can show that all starting and stopping at different points. There's some things like soccer expenses that we have for Sarah. We put a wedding in there in a year. Some of these years we've been playing around with this a little bit here inside the software. So, we might have been bouncing things around a little bit, but you probably hopefully get the idea of what kinds of things you can map out there. They put some extra travel in. So they're saying, okay, if we retire, we want to be able to travel a little bit more in that early part of retirement. In fact, actually that travel's starting now. So they're getting some extra trips in while they're still working here. And then all of that expense flow gets tallied up. But The idea is that you can get very specific on all of those different expenses and really see what that cash flow is looking like on a annual basis. And so as they go into retirement, and we blow this up here a little bit, we can see, okay, that first year of retirement, they need about $86,000 of cash flow. And then it's going to be some pretty big cash flows for a couple more years there, $165,000, $142,000. And then once that income starts to normalize a little bit, once they're both getting their Social Security benefits, their long-term cash flow need is really just about $50,000 a year. That would be the amount that would be coming out of the portfolio. Their portfolio assets at that time are projected to be over $4 million. So it's a very good percentage of withdrawal to the amount of assets that they have. So this says, okay, well, there's a couple things that could happen here. They could spend more money in retirement if they want. Maybe they could give some money to their kids if they wanted to do that, because I think this $50,000 gap is very, very modest compared to their assets there. They could retire earlier, so that might be something that you say, hey, you know what, our retirement looks really good. Let's bump retirement up to age 60. Let's bump it up 3 more years and see what that looks like. So it gives you the opportunity to really kind of play around with this a little bit and run different scenarios, see where you're at. But anyway, this is all something that we do as part of this Retirement Time Machine program. And how it works essentially is once you sign up, you're going to get access to a fact finder. And rather than you trying to learn the software and trying to figure out which one of the dozens and dozens of pages the information goes on, you're going to just do a very simple fact finder, answer some questions, get the detail, because there's a lot of detail that goes in this, get the detail that we need to build out the plan, but you're going to do that fact finder, and then you're going to click a button, it sends it back to our office, and then we actually build the financial plan so that you don't have to worry about getting the plan built out or learning the piece of software to figure out where everything goes. We're going to do that for you. And we also have some videos that go along with it. So if you do want to later on go in there and make changes to some of the information, or you really want to understand how it all works, I've got videos that give you that instruction. So you're not there just learning it kind of by trial and error. You're actually going to see step by step me walking you through how to put the information in, where it goes, and what it means. Most importantly, though, is that once your plan is built out, you're going to be looking at all of these different reports, and there's a lot of reports in here. So we were just looking at the cash flow report, but if we wanted to understand what your long-term taxes look like, we could do that. And this is going to give you some phenomenal breakdown here, even to look into the future, see what does that adjusted gross income look like into the future, your income tax base, how much is being taxed at the marginal tax rate, if you got any preference items. That's all going to be very much detailed out here. And that's one of the reasons we like this software more than other software providers that are out there, is because of the detail that I think eMoney really excels at versus some of those other software things. But anyway, you might be looking at this going, I don't know what this means. What is this chart telling me here? This is actually something we've talked about in other videos, but it's low tax years. So a lot of people have these. In fact, I think most people probably have these, especially if you're going into an early retirement where you don't have as much income in those early years. So that may offer an opportunity to do some tax optimization, do things like Roth conversions, for example. Looking at this tax report might tell you that you should be contributing to a Roth instead of the traditional, or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe you've been doing the Roth because you heard everyone talking about it and said that was the best way to go, but really based on your tax bracket and where your future tax rates are projected to go, maybe you should be doing the traditional, take that tax deduction right now. But anyway, I've got videos where I go through these reports and I talk about how to read the report and how to interpret the report. So if the report says this is kind of how you would want to interpret that. This is what that means precisely there. But there's dozens of reports in there, and then what we're including right now too, probably for somewhat of a limited time, we haven't changed it up, but we're also giving an hour of time with one of our financial advisors to go through the plan with you. So once you send over the fact finder, we build the plan, we send you access to the portal, so you have access to that. You watch the videos, you get in there, kind of take a deep dive, look at your reports, and then when you're ready, you can schedule that meeting with one of our advisors, and they're going to walk through, help you to make sure that everything is accurate, you've got the financial plan built out correctly, and then they're going to be able to walk you through some questions and help you to really make sure that you're understanding those different reports that are in there. That's for the Retirement Time Machine. If you do the Money Evolution plan, we just do everything for you. We build the plan, we hop on some meetings together, and it's with me where I go through and walk through the entire financial plan and come up with specific recommendations and details, bolted out action items, things like that. And it includes a series of 4 meetings that we do on that Money Evolution plan. But either way, if you're a little bit further away from retirement, I think the Retirement Time Machine is really the way to go for a lot of people. There's definitely a different cost difference on that. So anyway, if you want to learn more about that, about the Money Evolution plan or the Retirement Time Machine, we'll have some links down in the description below. All of it's over on our website, moneyevolution.com. Check that out and look forward to hopefully getting a chance to talk to you one day. Thanks.